Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a big show, lots of NBA news. The NBA draft is tonight. We talked a lot about that yesterday, so we'll do some more reactions after round one kicks off tonight at 8 o'clock. But there were some other major NBA news outside of the draft. Two major moves being made by the Nets. First of all, shedding their star player, Mikal Bridges, sending him to the Knicks for a haul. Five first round picks, a second round pick swap, and Bojan Bogdanovic, excuse me. A lot for a guy in Mikal Bridges. We'll talk about what that means for the Knicks, what that means for the Nets, as well as their other trade that they made with the Rockets that involved a bunch of pick swaps, them getting some of their picks back for the stuff they did with Kevin Durant's trade and everything along those lines. More NBA news, as well as Bam Adebayo signed a huge extension just about an hour ago, or is planning to sign a huge extension with the Miami Heat. We'll talk about what that means for the future of the Heat with Jimmy Butler, as he's had a lot of trade rumors around him. And then we'll also talk about whether or not that was a good signing for the Heat. Then we'll move into football to close out our show, talk a little bit about the Philadelphia Eagles. We're going to go through their offseason, and we're going to go through their schedule game by game, talk about everything they did, and see if they can rebound from what was a really miserable second half of the season last year. So we'll talk about all of that and more. But before we get into the Knicks trading for Mikal Bridges, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments, in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. But like I was saying, there was a lot of NBA news as the NBA offseason is in full swing now. So we're going to start with what was the biggest news coming out of last night. Mikal Bridges to the Knicks. Mikal Bridges was traded to the Knicks from the Nets. He's been moving around a little bit. He was sent to the Nets in that Kevin Durant trade for the net to the Suns, excuse me. And the Nets tried to run it with him. It didn't work. They missed the play-ins. They didn't have a great season, and now they trade him for a haul. Mikal Bridges is a great player, right? The Knicks got a great player to go along with their scheme. He hasn't missed a game since high school. Tom Thibodeau loves those guys that play forever. He might be the most Tom Thibodeau guy in the history of the NBA. That's just not a thing that happens, being able to play that many games for that consistent of a stretch. But he loves the game of basketball. He loves to play. He reunites with his Villanova buddies. The Knicks now have 4 players from Villanova, probably in their starting 5. If they can re-sign OG Anunoby, which all signs point to them wanting to do that, wanting to get that done. If they are able to re-sign OG Anunoby here this offseason, it's going to be a terrifying defense, right? You have Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, 2 of the best perimeter defenders in the league. Inside, you've got what was really great defending in the playoffs from Isaiah Hartenstein if they're able to sign him. And if not, you have Mitchell Robinson, who is a really good defender. He could use some work offensively, but a good defender, good on the boards. On the offensive end, you have, for now, Julius Randle. They didn't have to give him up to go and make this trade, which a lot of people thought they'd have to give up Julius Randle to go and make a move, but they didn't end up doing that. And they have Jalen Brunson, right? Jalen Brunson, the star of that Knicks team, the center of that offensive the center of that offensive engine, right? It's gonna be a really good team this year for the Knicks if they can stay healthy. And I don't feel like the Knicks are done, right? There's been a lot of talks of the Knicks going out and adding an extra guy, adding an extra player, right? There's going to be, the question of Is Julius Randle there? We were talking a little bit about it earlier. Is Julius Randle making this team better? He was out for that whole playoff run. He kind of disappears sometimes, but he's a good inside presence. I think Julius Randle is someone that's important, and if they can trade him, and I'm sure they can trade him and flip him for something. There's a lot of rumors surrounding the Knicks and Paul George. Paul George is at the center of a lot of trade rumors right now, much like Jimmy Butler, Kevin Durant. We'll talk a little bit about those guys in the third segment, but Paul George here was kind of the guy that a lot of people thought the Knicks were targeting here, and getting a guy like Mikal Bridges instead of Paul George really helps your timeline, right? Mikal Bridges is still young. He's still got a lot left in him, and he's got a bunch of years of control left as well. 5 first-round picks, 4 unprotected, is so much to give up. And I'm not sure that they couldn't have gotten him for less. As much as I like this move, right? And I think that this is a very good move for the Knicks. I think the Knicks made a great decision bringing in Mikal Bridges. He's going to help on both the offensive and the defensive ends, and it's so tough to find those guys, and he fits into that system, right? The camaraderie he already has. They already posted a FaceTime call with the 4 Nova boys, all on a call right when this trade got drafted, right? Once this trade went through, right? So, I mean, it's a lot to give up, but there's already team chemistry there. You don't have to worry about that. That's very important when you're trying to make a deep run, especially in the NBA nowadays, right? You have the camaraderie, you have the chemistry, and he fits into the system. So, I think this is a great move for the Knicks. Looking at how much they gave up, really looking at how much they gave up, it's shocking. And this is a blockbuster deal, right? You had the first big trade of the offseason with Alex Caruso basically going 1-for-1. And now, I mean, all these draft picks going for Mikal Bridges. And again, this is nothing against Mikal Bridges. I think he's a great player. I think this was a great move for them. But giving up 5 first-round picks, if you're the Knicks, and maybe you can get some back, if you trade a guy like Julius Randle, but this is a Knicks team that, I mean, while they're kind of set for the future, we talk about how weak the Eastern Conference was this year, how the Hawks might be able to make a jump. The Knicks are there. They've just made that big move. They're ready to make that jump. If they were healthy, they might have been able to give the Celtics a bit of a challenge there in the Eastern Conference Finals. But we have no way of knowing this, right? The Knicks are going to be really good. I hate how much they gave up to get a guy in Mikal Bridges who isn't really worth 5 first-round picks. And the other thing I'm worried about is how this is going to affect the rest of the trade market, right? You see teams are going to see Mikal Bridges go for 5 first-round picks and a player along with a pick swap, and then they look at what they have. The Heat, they have Jimmy Butler. He had trade talks around him. Paul George has had trade talks around him. How much are the Clippers going to ask for him? How much are the Clippers going to ask for Paul George if Mikal Bridges went for 5 first-round picks? Do I think Mikal Bridges is the better investment long-term than Paul George? Absolutely, I do. I think that was definitely the right choice for them to make. I think that was something that they made the right choice not bringing in an older veteran that would have just accelerated their timeline way faster and really shortened how long their championship window is. It's gonna be a fun battle between the Knicks and the Celtics if they do match up, because now, again, this is all assuming they're able to re-sign OG Anunoby. They'll have the length, the speed to guard the Celtics on the perimeter. That's the kind of defense that, the Celtics are going to struggle with a little bit. The Celtics team is built to move the ball, be faster than the other team, and shoot the lights out. Kill everybody on the perimeter. And if the Knicks are able to shut down or at least be as fast as the ball, then this is going to be a fun matchup. Obviously, that's projecting way ahead than where we are right now, just a couple weeks after the NBA Finals ends. But it's going to be cool to see. Anyway, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on the Mikal Bridges trade. I think this was the right move for the Knicks. It's been talked about for a while, but 5 first-round picks plus more is just a little too much, too rich for my blood. And I think it'll work out, but I'm worried about how much they've mortgaged their future for a move like this. But anyway, in our next segment, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Nets. They made another trade that just a couple hours after the Mikal Bridges trade, they did a pick swap with the Rockets. We'll talk about why they did that, what that means for the future of the Nets, and what this looks like in the coming years all around the NBA, how it's affecting everything. Because that was a beast. That was a trade that has a lot of moving pieces in it. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just talked about the major blockbuster trade between the Knicks and the Nets, where the Nets sent Mikal Bridges over with the second-round pick to the Knicks in exchange for 5 first-round picks, 4 of which are unprotected from the Knicks. One of them is protected from the Bucks, and Bojan Bogdanovic, along with the second-round pick as well over there. So a huge trade. The Knicks go all in. They build the Villanova 4, the Villanova core. It's going to be an interesting season. They're building their roster to stop the Celtics, is what that move says. And I mean, if there's any team that's built to do it, right now it's the Knicks. The question is if they can stay healthy to get to that point later on in the season. But in this segment here, we're going to move into another trade by the Nets. They made another crazy trade that right after the Mikal Bridges one, kind of signaling they are going full rebuild mode. This time, just a bunch of draft pick swaps, right? They made a trade with the Rockets to get some of their draft picks back, give them some Suns draft picks, as well as some choices for switching draft picks in the future, which is a really interesting thing in the NBA that a lot of other sports don't offer as an option. So we'll talk about the implications of this, what the move kind of signals, not just for the Nets, for the Rockets, and for the rest of the NBA trade market and the free agency as we enter into it full steam. But before we get into that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw that in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the other side of this Nets trade. We just talked about the Mikal Bridges one, which was step 1 in the rebuild process here. But what really kind of threw the nail in the coffin for the Nets trying to compete, at least what signaled it for me, is this second trade here. the Nets swapped some draft picks, and that is saying it about as simply as you possibly can be saying it. Uh, Pulling it up here, they made a trade with the Rockets for a to get their own picks back, right? The Nets were in a position where they couldn't really tank because they didn't have any of their own draft picks. They didn't have any of their own ability. They didn't have any of their draft picks because they made some trades. They traded for James Harden. They traded for Kyrie Irving. They traded for Kevin Durant, right? They made all these trades to build that super team, and it ended up not working out for them. But it's one of those things where you have so many different moving pieces, right? You have on one corner the Nets getting their picks back, right? You have the Rockets getting some Suns picks with the theory that they would like to go get Kevin Durant, right? The full pick swap here, right? You have they get their 2026 first for the 2027 Suns first. The Rockets also get a right in the 2025 to swap a Rockets or Thunder trade for the 2025 Suns first round pick. So there's lots of different options. It's still flexible. Stuff is still moving around in this deal, but a lot of different firsts. But the main thing that the Nets get out of this is their own first round pick back in 2026. They are going to be able to control at least one pick, because the way that the draft picks move around the league nowadays, the way that draft picks get traded from team to team to team. The Suns and Rockets haven't made a trade, but now the Rockets have up to three, of the Suns' first round picks, right? It's just they keep moving around, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you're playing hot potato with these picks, and it's nice to have your own picks. That's how you get the control in this situation, right? Now they have that control. They're able to tank. And I know that's like the boogeyman word in the NBA after the process with the 76ers. And, they're doing so much anti-tanking protocol all around the NBA nowadays. But being able to tank successfully and tank easily is a genuinely good strategy to build your team, right? You get that number one overall pick in most years, that's going to be an instant star, right? You can count on that guy to come in most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time you can count on that guy to come in, and he can help turn your franchise into something if you get enough of those. Now, you don't want to be in the basement forever, and it's not a situation that you love to be in, but it's a situation that is possible to get done as long as you have your own picks. And the Nets getting their own picks back here and trading their star in Mikal Bridges really signals a shift in their philosophy. Before this, they were trying to, build around Mikal Bridges. They were going to try and be competitive with a Mikal Bridges led team. A kind of similar situation to what they tried to do with D'Angelo Russell, where they made the playoffs that one time. Back in 2015, 2016, something right around there. They were trying to do something like that, and I think it's smart that they blew it up, right? And we talked about it with the Bulls. We've talked about it with a lot of different teams here, actually. With the Blue Jays, I think the most recently. And we'll talk about the Blue Jays tomorrow. I was going to talk about that before breaking news happened just about an hour ago, but you have to know when to blow up your team, right? There's a fine line there, right? Because it's easy for us to say, outsiders looking in, hey, we're not going to win a championship, blow it up, right? But you have to remember that unless everybody's on board with that, that's how you lose your job, right? If you have to set the expectations. You have to make sure everybody's on the same page. These are people's livelihoods, right? They come in and they blow it up. It's not an easy decision. It's not easy to rebuild a team. It's not something you can just snap your fingers and all of a sudden, boom, you have a two all pro level talents on your team. Like we talked about the Sixers with the process and how, I mean, it's sort of been a success, I guess, but they haven't made it out of the second round. I mean, they've become a top team in the East, but they haven't won a championship. And I don't know if you call the process a true success, right? They really only got one guy out of it. They got Joel Embiid. They had Ben Simmons for a second there, but I mean that never ended up that ended up obviously poorly. Ben Simmons currently is probably going to be the tank commander for the Nets, right? He has been unable to stay healthy, and when he's healthy, he's been unable to get back to that all-star form that we saw him in the beginning of his career because he just lost his confidence, which is it's unfortunate, but I don't know. It's just something that you have to be able to get past there if you are Ben Simmons. But getting back to the Nets here, it's a really admirable thing that they did to admit that, hey, we're not going to win a championship with this team. We need to hit the reset button, and we need to hit it now, and we need to get everything we can out of it. And it's such a tough decision to make. But if you make that decision at the right time, which I think the Nets did a great job of choosing when to pull the trigger on this, if they make that decision at the right time, it can make that rebuild go 10 times faster. You don't want to be stuck in a situation like the Wizards where they refused to let go, right? They kept, I mean, some of it is injuries with the Wizards, right? And I'm a Wizards fan here, so it's not something that's great. It's great experience, but you had that John Wall, Bradley Beal team back in 2014, 2015, right? Where they were one game away from the Eastern Conference Finals, and then injuries happened, right? And despite the injuries, the Wizards were still trying to go on with Bradley Beal, and they finally blew it up, last season. And, they let Kristaps Porzingis go. They didn't get a lot in return for him. They got Chris Paul, flipped him for a good haul. They traded Bradley Beal for a good haul. They're starting to make that difference where you can see maybe the signs, and obviously a lot of that is in good drafting, which they have historically not been very good at drafting, but it's all part of it, right? Knowing when to blow it up, it saves you from a long rebuild process. And I think the Nets front office did a great job of knowing when to blow it up because it's not an easy decision to make. It's not an easy decision to say, hey, fans, I'm sorry, but we're going to be bad. And you just have to accept that. It's not a decision that always goes over well. In fact, it's a decision that most of the time doesn't go over well, and a lot of the time cost these guys jobs, right? Head coaches, GMs. Winning is their job, right? And if you can't do it, I mean, I'm sure they have a timetable. The owner were like, hey, you blow it up, you have X amount of years. We'll just say 5 years to turn this around, right? They've got a ticking clock now, and stress is the ball is in their court. They made that decision, and now they just need to go back it up. And a lot more teams can learn from this. The Bulls, for instance, should blow it up. They don't really have any pieces to blow it up anymore, but, they should have gotten more for Alex Caruso. They can try and trade Zach LaVine for something. Not that they're really going to get much with his contract and everything, all his injuries and stuff, but other teams can learn from this, and I applaud the Nets for making this tough decision, for making a decision that is going to be unpopular with their fans, but they needed to do this. They hit the hard reset button, and the Nets are going to be better for it 5 years down the line. So that's a good move. They got a haul, and they get some control in a tank with their picks back with the Rockets. But anyway, let me know what you think of the Nets making these moves. Was it the right time to make these moves? Should they have waited? Should they have given it another shot with Mikal Bridges and not having their draft picks? Or would you have done what the Nets did there? We are going to move and finish off our basketball talk for the day, heading down to South Beach, Miami, where Bam Adebayo gets an extension. 3 years, $166 million to stay in Miami. We'll talk about what the implications are of that on him, the Miami Heat, and Jimmy Butler as we head further and further into what already is a crazy NBA offseason. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we just finished talking all about the Nets and what their two trades today, or should I say yesterday, mean, for their future. As they get some of their picks back, they trade Mikal Bridges for a haul, 5 first-round picks to the Knicks, or from the Knicks for Mikal Bridges. A big day for the Nets as they seemingly unload everything and hit the hard reset button, which I think is a good move. In this segment here, though, we are going to finish off our basketball talk a little bit about Bam Adebayo signing a brand new 3-year, $166 million deal to stay in Miami. What that means for the Heat, what that means for Jimmy Butler, as trade talks swirl around the Heat superstar right now. But before we get into that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to add, go ahead and throw it in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our final basketball segment for the day, Bam Adebayo. Bam Adebayo signs a 3-year, $166 million extension to stay in South Beach, play with the Miami Heat. Bam Adebayo kind of gets second fiddle to Jimmy Butler because of the heights that Jimmy Butler has been able to take this Heat team to, right? But Bam Adebayo on his own, undoubtedly a great basketball player, right? He's one of the best defenders in the league. He averages a double-double on very efficient double-double, might I add. And he signs a massive deal. You know, he's getting over $40 million a year, almost 50, more than $50 million a year. What am I talking about? To stay in Miami and probably be the leader of that team. Now, we have seen them be successful without Jimmy Butler and with Bam Adebayo, but we haven't seen them reach the heights that they have with Jimmy Butler. So it raises a question with the Heat of what does this mean for Jimmy Butler as in his future with the Heat. There's been lots of trade talks, lots of swirling rumors surrounding Jimmy Butler being traded this offseason. Is he going to stay with the Heat after this deal? Does he even want to stay with the Heat? This is a commitment to Bam to say, hey, you're the guy now. That's what it feels like. It feels like this might be the end of the line for Jimmy Butler, especially, like I said, with all of these rumors swirling. But the question is, can he lead it, right? With the team as it stands right now, they're built when they win basketball games, especially in the playoffs, their three-point shooting is lights out, right? And it hurts that Jimmy Butler isn't there because the intensity that he plays with, his leadership, even if he, isn't always playing with that intensity. When he gets into playoff mode and he plays with his heart on his sleeve, it pumps everybody on that team up. And that's a really important quality to have as a leader. He's a vocal leader. He's a leader by example. And Bam Adebayo can be that guy, right? He just needs to step into that role. Is he going to start being the primary ball handler, the guy they run the offense through? Maybe not. But giving a contract like this to a guy like Bam Adebayo, who can contribute a double-double every night, who can be that defensive linchpin on the inside. Already one of the best interior defensive players in the league. His length, his ability to defend all over the court, and being able to defend down low, especially with his speed, strength, and size, is a combination that's really rare to see in the NBA nowadays. You have a really good Heat team that really good at spacing. You've got lots of shooters. That's how they built their team. That Heat culture is a real thing. But like I said, what this contract says to me more than anything is Jimmy Butler might be gone. And like I said, we saw the Heat without Jimmy Butler, this iteration of the Heat without Jimmy Butler in the playoffs this season. Granted, it was against the Celtics, right? And the Celtics were a juggernaut. They weren't going to get stopped by anyone this season. Even though Jimmy Butler and the Heat have been that thorn in their side forever, right? It just didn't feel this Celtics team never felt stressed, right? Even in the game that they lost to the Heat had to shoot over 50% from three. Bam Adebayo is a good leader, and he can lead this team to the playoffs pretty comfortably, right? He's basically been in charge of the regular season, and he's led them to a play-in tournament every single time. But that's also with him sitting out a whole bunch of games, and this Heat team really relying on their deep bench to go and score a lot of points there, stay in the conversation for contenders. But if Jimmy Butler gets traded and they don't get like a true star back, now I'd be shocked if they didn't get a star back, or some high picks to go and get a guy that they really, really like. But Jimmy Butler is still the beating heart of that team, and I'm not sure if the Heat are going to re-sign him now. He has got 1 year left on his deal, and he wants that money. He's getting a little bit older, and like I said, there's been lots of trade rumors surrounding him. So generally where there's smoke, there's fire, especially in the NBA. Now, that's not always the case, right? We talked about Paul George. He's probably going to get traded this offseason. Kevin Durant is another name that's been thrown around. The Rockets really want to get a guy, and aside from getting off track a little bit, I don't think the Rockets need to go get another guy, or I don't think it's worth it for them to go get one of those old aging veterans. I don't think they're that close to a championship yet, right? They're not at that point. They've got some nice pieces. Jalen Green's a nice guy to build around, but if you go out and you get a guy like Paul George, or you get a guy like Kevin Durant to pair with him, they'll make the playoffs. They might make it to the second round, but they still don't feel like a serious threat in the West, even with those guys. The Kevin Durant one, that one's been shut down. The Suns want to run it back for some reason. I'd get rid of him if I had the chance, just because we saw how it did not work last season with three ball heavy, ball needy guys on that offense and no defense, and them eating a huge chunk of that salary cap, just those three guys. So we'll see. But the Heat are the Heat are in a very interesting situation, right? They've made it to the finals 2 times in the last 5 years, right? And Jimmy Butler's been the engine behind that. But he's getting older. They now signed Bam. They've just extended Bam Adebayo, again, kind of symbolically making him the face of that team. He already was up there with Jimmy Butler. But it just doesn't feel like he's going to stay with this Heat team. Eric says they need to go all in and keep Jimmy buckets. And I think if they want to keep competing, you're absolutely right. But this Heat team, I don't know. It just feels like he's not going to be there as the offseason continues. And, I feel like there's going to be some mega offer made for Jimmy Butler. The 76ers really, really want him back they really want him back, pair him with Joel Embiid. They're desperate to keep Joel Embiid up there. And if, if the Heat can get a guy like Tyrese Maxey in that trade, I mean, I doubt that the Sixers would trade Tyrese Maxey, but if they can get a guy like Tyrese Maxey in that deal, uh, do it. There's gonna be an offer. I feel like for Jimmy Butler that the Heat just cannot refuse, and that is what I'm waiting on as we head forward into the rest of the NBA offseason. But anyway, congratulations to Bam Adebayo on getting his contract. He deserves it. He's been one of the best defenders in the league all season long. But anyway, we're going to transition out of the NBA and in our next segment move to the NFL. We talked all about the Cowboys yesterday. Today, we're going to talk about the other top team in the NFC East, the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll talk about what their offseason looked like, whether they improved or got worse, give them a grade, and then we'll talk about their schedule, go game for game, and break down if they will rebound from what was a miserable, awful second half to the season last year. But anyway, stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished our NBA talk for the day. We talked about Bam Adebayo signing a 3-year, $166 million extension with the Heat, what that means for the future of the Heat with Jimmy Butler, and now Bam Adebayo getting a large sum of money from them. We also talked about the Nets throwing in the towel, hitting that hard reset button. Whether or not that was a good decision, we'll have to see, but I think it was the right decision, at least looking at everything we have right now. They got some of their draft picks back, and that's going to make it easier in a rebuild that they have just hit the big red button on, as they also traded Mikal Bridges to the Knicks. They got a huge haul for him, 5 first-round picks. We talked about that in the we talked about that in the first segment. But anyway, that was the big NBA news today. We'll cover more NBA tomorrow as the NBA draft takes place tonight. But we are going to move into the world of football. We're continuing our breakdown of the offseason and schedule predictions for every single team. Yesterday, we started off our little segments there with the Dallas Cowboys. We're going to continue around the NFC East this time, talking about the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll talk about their offseason here in this segment, and in our next segment, we will talk about, we'll break down their schedule, talk about everything that they have to do and if they will improve on last season and how it ended. But before we get into all of that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. If you should pop up on the bottom of the screen, for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and throw that in the chat, in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. Kelsey says Chargers Giants Super Bowl. I wish that would be that would be a lot of fun, and we'll get to the Chargers in a little bit. We're gonna finish up the NFC East this week, and then we'll do the AFC West next week, sure. But we got the Eagles here today. The Eagles off-season review. They had a they had a they had a really good offseason, right? Eric says the Eagles. My guy let the Giants have a win against the Eagles, or at least a close loss, like 30-13. I wish as a diehard Giants fan, I wish I could do that. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. That's in our next segment. We'll go game by game. Maybe they'll steal one week 18 when the Eagles rest a couple guys. We'll see. But the Eagles offseason, they had a really good offseason, right? You go from a Super Bowl that you were maybe one play away from winning, maybe one penalty call away, from winning, to now having a miserable second half of the season, losing in the first round of the playoffs to the Baker Mayfield led Buccaneers, right? This is a big rebuilding season, reloading off season for them, right? They get, first of all, from the Giants, Saquon Barkley. That's the big off season signing. They go get Saquon Barkley from the Giants. It sucks, but he signs a huge deal for running backs, a $12 million deal, making him a top 5 paid running back in the league. Starts a whole thing. I mean, he's a free agent. He can do what he wants. They did a tampering investigation. Nothing came of it. But he is going to transform that Eagles offense. They also extended both of their top 2 wide receivers in A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. That two-headed weapon, that two-headed attack, Jalen Hurts at quarterback. Now he has a real running threat in Saquon Barkley. They had Miles Sanders before. They had, DeAndre Swift, who, is okay when he gets ahead of steam, but Saquon Barkley will change the way that offense runs. Their offensive line got a little worse with the retirement of Jason Kelce, but, you add offensive talent like they did. You add Saquon Barkley, you bring back your receivers, extend both of them. It's going to be a very, very successful offseason, right? You take a look at their departures. They didn't really lose too many guys. They lost Kevin Byard, who they acquired from the Titans at the deadline, or before the trade deadline last season. DeAndre Swift is not related to Taylor Swift. That would be a fun story if he was, though. But they lost Kevin Byard. They lost Jack Driscoll. Those are probably their 2 biggest losses, aside from Jason Kelce to retirement. But on their re-signings, Brandon Graham comes back, the defensive end. I don't think Fletcher Cox said he officially retired yet, but there are, he's probably not coming back. They lost a little bit on that defensive line, but that defensive line was so great that they have the depth to be able to deal with that. You talk about a team that, really just needed to get a new philosophy. Their defense was awful last season, right? Their defensive coordinator was a mess. Their secondary was a mess. They get C.J. Gardner-Johnson back, who left for 1 season to go play with the Lions. Now they add him back to his secondary, and they draft two safeties, or two corners in the draft. They get to shore up, their secondary, something that they desperately needed. As well as replacing Marcus Mariota with Kenny Pickett. And again, on that defensive end, they bring in Devin White, linebacker, who he's a little bit older now, but he still moves with the best of them. He's a great cover linebacker. He's going to be able to be he's going to be able to be one of those the great tight end defenders. Something that in a division with with some good tight ends in a situation where you're going to have to go up against some great tight ends in the playoffs if they want to be successful. He's going to be a key piece to that defense, and that might be the biggest defensive signing, maybe even the biggest addition overall for them. Again, I think this was a great offseason for the Philadelphia Eagles. Like I said, they shored up the offense. They added Saquon Barkley. They took care of their guys, most importantly, bringing back both of their receivers on massive deals near the top of the entire wide receiver market at the time. Now they've both been overtaken, but they're happy. Saquon comes in and he deserves to win some football games. He deserves it. But this Eagles team is going to be good. It really is. I'm gonna give them a B+ for their offseason. Again, they can't control their departures. That's the thing. That's the thing that's stopping them from getting an A. They lost, like Eric says, they lost Jason Kelce. That was a huge loss on the offensive line. I still think they'll be just fine. They already basically had a center waiting in the wings to replace him, and they drafted another one before. So their offensive line will be good. It was still one of the best in football. It's going to be more the morale kind of situation because he was a leader in that locker room. He's going to be missed in that locker room. But again, Fletcher Cox being gone, Jason Kelce being gone, it gives an opportunity for Jalen Hurts to step up and be a leader, for a guy like Saquon Barkley to assert himself as a leader in that locker room, because it's kind of a changing of a guard. You get those old Eagles out, Eagles that have won Super Bowls in the past for them, who were part of that Super Bowl winning team, and now you get the new generation of Eagles as they continue to be a very, very good football team. So I am going to give them a B+. Again, if they hadn't lost some guys to retirement, this would have been an A. I really loved what they did in the draft, getting that corner help. And getting C.J. Gardner-Johnson in free agency, Devin White, and adding Saquon Barkley, as well as re-signing their receivers. They checked every single box off that they needed to get done. So giving them a B+ here overall. Like I said, in our next segment, we're going to go game by game for the Eagles, break down what their schedule looks like, how many games they're going to win, which games they're going to win, and I will post. I got a big old spreadsheet. I'll post it all once I finish the whole division. So I'll put that all in there for people to see. But stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the Eagles offseason, giving them a grade. I gave them a B+, if only because they lost some of their big players to retirement in Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelce. We also talked a lot of NBA earlier in the show, as Mikal Bridges got traded to the Knicks from the Nets for 4 unprotected firsts, one protected first, a pick swap, Bojan Bogdanovic, and a second. and we also talked about the other pick swaps that the Nets made as they hit the big red reset button and start their rebuild for real. They did a good job kicking it off right. They've got a lot of assets to make a successful rebuild happen faster than if they just let it ride and faded away into obscurity. So good move by them. And then we also talked about Bam Adebayo and the Heat, what they might do after he signs a 3-year, $166 million deal to stay in South Beach, what that means for Jimmy Butler and everyone else in the NBA. But like I said, in this segment, we are going to finish up our NFL coverage, finish up our Eagles coverage to close out our show today, talking a little bit about their schedule. We're going to go game by game, break down the matchups, what I think is going to happen, and give them a record prediction and if they will make the playoffs or not. So stick around for that. But before we get into it, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and leave that in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. For instance, Kelsey brings up Alex Morgan not being on the U.S. team. That is a shame. I believe, again, I haven't looked too much into it, so I apologize. Not too educated on that, but I'm pretty sure it's because of retirement, right? Or injury. But anyway, it is a shame that the U.S. soccer team is really good, and it's going to continue to get better. They've got a lot of rising stars coming up, both on the men's and the women's side. But we are going to get into the Eagles' schedule here. Go over the schedule predictions for the Philadelphia Eagles in 2024. And like I said, they were coming off what was a miserable second half of the season for them. Second half of the season were after the bye week. They won their first 2 games, but then lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They lost 5 of their last 6 games, only beating the Giants in what was a tight game against Tommy DeVito there. But they finish up their season last year 11-6. They make a playoff wild card game. They lose to the Buccaneers on the road. And it just was a huge downhill slope for them. They look to rebound. We talked about their offseason, all of their additions, and they kick off their first game in Brazil on a Friday against the Packers. 2 green teams in a place where they can't wear green is an interesting decision by the NFL. But this is going to be a good game to start off, and I think the Eagles, with their new weapons, are going to be able to take game 1. It's going to be a tight one. Excuse me. It's going to be a tight one in Brazil. But I'm taking the Eagles to beat the Packers week 1. Jordan Love and the Packers are going to be really good this season. We obviously saw them win a playoff game last season, maybe almost beat the 49ers after that, but they weren't able to hold on. But I have the Eagles taking week 1 in a tight one against the Packers. Brazil, yes. I don't know why they're going to Brazil. They're trying to expand the game, and playing in Brazil, it's a big market. They got a nice stadium, big football fans over there. Why not try out Brazil, spread the game to South America? But it's going to be the second game of the season, a Friday night, taking place in Brazil, and I have the Eagles taking that in week 1. Week 2, they have the Falcons at home. They played Kirk Cousins a lot when he was on the Commanders. I have them taking that, winning week 2, going a quick 2-0 on the season, have everything going good. And then they have 2 games, week 3 and week 4, against the Saints and the Buccaneers. Those are both on the road. Those are both tough games. I have them. I had a tough decision with these 2 because I have a feeling that they're going to drop one of them, not both, but one. I have them losing week 3 to the Saints. Again, this is a game that could go either way, but in the Superdome down there in New Orleans is a place that the Eagles have struggled a little bit at times. And I think, after getting on that hot streak, focusing on the Buccaneers, the team that, eliminated them from the playoffs last season, I think they might look ahead a little bit which I do think they're going to take that game against the Bucks. So start that season 3-1, and they have an early bye week this year. They have a bye week in week 5, and that's going to be a question of how it's going to affect them down the stretch. Because after that, they play 13 straight games to close out the season, and that is not an easy thing to do. When you look at their schedule, they have to play the entire AFC North. The AFC North might be the toughest division in football this season, and all of that is backloaded. The first one in that division that they play is actually right off the bye against the Browns, and that defense I think is going to be a little much for the Eagles. I have them falling to 3-2 after week 6 here, and then they get their first division game, taking on the Giants. And like I was saying to Eric earlier, as much as it hurts me to say this as a Giants fan, the Eagles are just a better team. We lost Saquon Barkley. There's going to be a lot. I feel like this game in particular in MetLife Stadium is going to be very chippy, that week 7 game. But I think the Eagles are going to take this game in MetLife. Maybe a Saquon Barkley revenge game isn't going to be fun, but I have the Eagles taking this, going to 4-2 on the season. Then they travel to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. That's going to be too much. I have them losing that game in week 8 before going back home, taking on the Jaguars in week 9. And this is an interesting matchup. We've seen this matchup before. Trevor Lawrence just got extended. The last time we saw it, it was rainy and the Jags played awful. We'll see what happens this time. I think the Jags will take this game, and through 9 weeks of the season, so halfway through the year, the Eagles are 5-3 in charge, of the division. And something that I brought up last year, the Eagles did not win the division last year. The Cowboys ended up winning it. A trend in the NFC East. No team has won the NFC East twice in a row since the Eagles did it in 2003, 2004. So that's something to keep in mind here. It's something that I don't really see stopping this season. But then they go week 10 to the Cowboys in Jerry World on the road against a division rival. I have them losing that game. So they fall in week 10 to 5-4. Then they get the Commanders week 11, should be an easy game at home, before going out to LA to take on the Rams. That is a long flight. But I have them taking that one. Again, I think that'll be a tight game, but I'll have them taking that game week 12 on the road, improving their record to 7-4, Week 13 at the Ravens. Again, another cross-country flight, this time against the Ravens. That's not going to work out for them. I have them losing that. They are 7-5 before they go to the Panthers. Week 14. I think the Panthers are going to be much better this year. I really do. But this Eagles team is, frankly, is going to continue to be better. Like I said, they made improvements in the offseason. I don't think they'll collapse down the stretch. So I will take the Panthers to lose to the Eagles in week 14. And then we kind of get to the back half of the schedule. 15, 16, 17, 18. They play the Steelers week 15. That tough defense after 10 straight weeks of playing football is going to be too much for them. I have the Steelers taking that game. So they currently sit at 8-6, basically tied with the Cowboys for the division, tied with the Cowboys if everything goes the way that I have it predicted in week 16 at the top of that division. And they have 3 straight division games to end it out against the Commanders, the Cowboys, and the Giants. I have them beating the Commanders, and then the Cowboys week 17. That is in Philly, and I think that's going to be the difference. That is going to be a raucous crowd because that game could decide the division. I have the Cowboys losing that game week 17, and then I have week 18 against the Giants. And at this point, the Cowboys, if everything is the way I have it, the Cowboys are 9-7, and the Eagles would be 10-6 at this point. So this is a game that they have to win against the Giants. And as much as I hate to say it, as much as I hate to go against my Giants twice, this is a game that they have to win the division. And I think the Eagles will take care of business there, finishing up the season on a 3-game win streak versus the division, finishing 11-6, winning the division by 1 game over the Cowboys, who had finishing 10-7 this year. It is going to be, it is what it is, right? But you got to take your fan hat off sometimes, and go with what's right. Again, that's all the way out in week 18, so anything could happen. Maybe the Giants are 16-0 at that point, but but anyway, I've got the Eagles winning the NFC East at 11-6, continuing that trend of a new champion for the last 20 years in the NFC East. They'll have a top 4 seed in the playoffs this year, and we'll see if they can build off of their past 2 seasons. Eric asks, the Eagles during the regular season isn't the problem, but do you believe if healthy, the Eagles can beat the 49ers? That is the question, right? I think the Eagles have done a really good job of kind of going bar for bar with the 49ers, right? You have Christian McCaffrey versus Saquon Barkley, probably the 2 best running backs in the league. I'm still giving that to McCaffrey. In the quarterback position, I think Jalen Hurts is better than Brock Purdy. The wide receivers for the Eagles are better. But in the playoffs, anything can happen. We saw the Eagles beat them in the playoffs. We saw the 49ers kill them in the regular season last season. But that's going to be a fun one if it gets there. I do think that we might come down to that as the season goes on. But this 49ers team is really good. And if healthy, I think this Eagles team can beat anybody. They have, if you just look at that roster, again, they've fixed up that secondary. I like the draft picks they made, being able to shore up that secondary and get Devin White in coverage against George Kittle is going to be huge. But again, if healthy is the big question. That's a good caveat to add there, Eric. But yeah, I have the Eagles finishing 11-6 on the year, finishing on a 3-game win streak, just squeaking out that division over the Cowboys in what should be hopefully a fun race to watch down the stretch. But anyway, thank you everybody so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Tomorrow we'll talk about the NBA draft. We'll talk about the Commanders tomorrow. Give an offseason recap for them, as well as a schedule prediction as well, and anything else that goes on in the world of sports. See you same time, same place tomorrow. You guys have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I feel like it's gonna be a bad day. I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn.